Okay, so the panel, tell me if I forget anybody, but we've got the Salyers and we have the Centellans and we have Mike and Lisa Hurley, and then we have Aaron, who we're super excited about joining us. Okay, so yeah, why don't you go through that and then we'll go to questions.
I know I've said this several times for those of you that have been on the call, but the West did not have their class and we will reschedule it. But as always, you can just go to the website and watch the videos. Also, I just wanted to remind you that we have handouts on the website. So we made an outline of the whole class on consequence because it was a lot of material. And then we made a little decision tree on how to decide whether you should give a consequence or not. So it makes you stop and think before you react. And obviously you can make it your own. You don't have to use ours. And then we also have a freedoms and privilege checklist that has it has possible problems that you might be having with the child, and then it has some virtues that you can be working on to help them in that area. So I just wanted to make sure you know, in case you're not going to the website and looking at everything on there, which I don't expect you to. Oh, and also on the resource page, we have a document called, I think it's called Virtues or Character Virtues, and it has a list of them. So if you're like me, I didn't know what virtues really were, like, oh, self-control, maybe, humility. Kindness, yeah, some basics, but that was it, because I wasn't raised with them, and I didn't know how in the world to teach them to my kid when I didn't even know if I had any. So that list has really helped me. We defined it, and then we had a lot of scriptures that we could use to help impart wisdom with our kids.
So before I ask questions, and it's okay if you don't want to address this or don't have anything to say about it, but is there anything that you would tell 0 to 5 parents about this topic that's different than 6 and up? Just dive in. Okay, excellent. All right. So
Mike raised his hand.
Oh, sorry. Mike, did you have something?
Okay. Oh, he does not.
All right. So here we go. The first couple to sign up to answer this question is Stephen and Kelly. And the question is, how do you communicate with your child that because of their inappropriate behavior, they are forfeiting a freedom? How do you communicate that to a child in the 0 to 5 range?
All right. Well, one thing that's super helpful is the freedoms and privileges checklist that you guys have on your website. Because I think when they're 0 to 5, it's really helpful to break what freedoms they have down into what's a verbal freedom and what's a physical freedom. Yeah. So when our kids were younger, one of the verbal freedoms or requirements that we required of our kids was when they were called, they had to come to us and put their hand on us and answer yes, mommy, or yes, daddy. And they still do it now that they're 10 and 8. But I think really focusing on that aspect of it, making sure that those things are in line, really help when it comes to, okay, now my child's not doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're losing a freedom. What does that look like? One of the other things that we did when our kids were really, really little, one of the things we focused on was making sure that they didn't have the freedom to get their way after whining. That was a big one for us. So one of the things we did when they were really little, like when they were still in their crib, when they woke up from a nap or something, I would not physically go and pick them up until they would get happy for me. And not in like a mean way, but I just been like, okay, are you ready to be happy? And like they got the hang of it really quickly. They're like, okay, I'm good. And up we go. So training things like that at a young age are really helpful. So then when it's time to lose a freedom, the way that we would speak to our younger kids, it's so much easier to just do this by example. So I'm going to think of a particular example. When one of our children was younger, they would lose the freedom of sitting at the table with the family if they were pouting at dinner time. So I would say, okay, sweetheart, we're going to come sit over here. Like we just had a separate bar area and just that small amount of physical separation was enough to really communicate like, hey, we're throwing a fit, so we don't have the freedom to be in everyone else's space. So we're gonna have to go sit over here until we can regain self-control, or when they're little, I would say, until you can get happy, we're going to be over here so that the rest of us can eat in peace. So that's an example. You got any other examples?
You know, I don't have an example, but I think the thing I'd say is when we were first parenting, I didn't understand why having so many freedoms is a bad thing. And, you know, the Growing Kids God's Way curriculum explains it very well. You know, if you let them decide what color cup they get and what they eat and what they get to watch, by the time it's time to say, hey, you need to go pick up your toys, they think they have the privilege to decide, no, I don't
Yeah.
want to do that. Whereas if you make it, you know, they have to earn that privilege to be able to make those decisions. So understanding that if you're in the practice of letting your child choose everything in their life, first time obedience is going to be very hard for them.
Yeah.
And so you've got to first narrow it down and let them earn those privileges. And sometimes it's tightening up again. You know, you've given them freedoms and now you're starting to see disobedience again. You may need to tighten up on how many choices they get. And that was helpful for me because I thought I was being a good dad by letting them choose blue or red cup. You know, I'm like trying to make them feel good, but I was actually hurting them just because they didn't understand, well, why do I get to choose this, but I can't say no to you on this? And so, yeah.
That's
Excellent. That's
excellent.
excellent.
Yeah, I could not have said any of that better myself. Thank you guys for that. So the next two questions are Mike and Lisa, you guys have these, but if it's okay with you, I'm sort of going to read them as one and then you can just tackle them at your own pace. It's because they're very similar. How do you explain to your child that freedoms are earned based on their maturity to handle a specific freedom? And how do you help your child understand that they're not ready to have a certain freedom when they think they are ready?
Well, I know we don't believe in luck as Christ followers, but y'all are the lucky group because you get to start when they're young and you don't give them many freedoms at all, right? So you're not having to do a lot. I mean, you will just because we're human and God knows our weaknesses and strengths, and there'll be things that you'll have to backtrack. But boy, this is so good for this age group because really they're not starting with a lot of choices. That's kind of the ground zero, right? And so the choices sort of funnel up, bloom out.
Yeah.
As they understand, as you understand really what moral maturity is. I had no clue about moral maturity. I thought the more choices you give them when they're young, the more that they'll be able to learn it faster, or they have a longer time to learn virtue. That did not work well. But for me, you know, fortunately, God is great and he helped to intervene with us when our kids were in terms of this stuff when they were maybe 4 or 5. So anyway, I just wanted to start off saying how good it is that you guys get to start when they're younger with very, very little choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're explaining that freedoms are earned based on maturity, really that's even your virtue training. You teaching them that freedoms are earned is part of the virtue training that they get. And I love using sort of these physical analogies to get my kids to understand. Am I not being heard?
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. Mike was
That's all
saying,
you're saying is too low.
okay, hopefully this is better. I have to.
It's you just sound very soft spoken.
Okay, I'll go louder and I'll get closer. So I would often use physical analogy and role play when they were little. You know, virtue training through play is very powerful. And so I would take an umbrella and I would say, let's be under the umbrella. And we would play under the umbrella. And after a little while, I would say, God gives us each other, and God gives you mommy and daddy as your umbrella. And all our children come under the umbrella because that's how God gives us protection for you, to shelter you, you know? That whole idea of the first virtue, which is trusting your parents. And I say that assuming that you guys have already looked at that chart. Boy, I had charts on my fridge. Remember? We had a flow chart. We didn't have the checklist the way that this one is laid out. We had this flow chart, and I would refer to this flow chart to teach myself what virtues were. And I would refer to the flow chart to teach me whether my children were, you know, were they really being foolish, or were they just
Childishness or foolishness?
Oh,
you
yeah.
tell them, hold on a second, guys. We're having this conversation, and they'd say, well, why can't I want pasta? I don't want vegetables. And I'd go, okay, hold on, let me get my chart. Hold on. Go look, until I could train myself to really understand what it was that they needed and then how to explain that to them. So I often use just a lot of these physical virtue lessons about the umbrella of trust. And I would teach them exactly what you're learning. For you to have choices, one day you'll have so many choices. You have to learn what God wants you to learn in your virtues. And I would use the word virtue, I would use the word character to help them familiarize themselves with biblical concepts. And as they got a little older, I would put in a little bit more fun examples about who wants to drive a car? Who wants to ride a bike? Who wants to drive a plane one day? Are you ready to do it now? No, why not? And then we talk about how you have to learn how to operate things. You have to learn how to be trained. And in virtue, you have to learn to be trained morally so that God can give you the choices when the time is right. You hear my voice, you hear my inflections, right? You just have to be able to speak in a way that they're going to get it, and they're not going to get it right away, and they'll pitch a fit, and they will learn eventually that pouting, they don't have the freedom for that. Whining, complaining, but you're not lecturing them, right? You're training them. So you can expect for them to do these things without reacting, because you know, eventually, as you plant those seeds of training in virtue and character, they'll get it, and it will be much easier. So I'll just kind of pause there and
Yeah. So I think what I would add to that is it's very important for us to elevate the positive virtues in our family times. And I think the point can't be understated that if we devalue family times, we are going to find ourselves having more of a challenge in this area, right? And what I mean by that is we have an opportunity to get ahead of the kids in having non-conflict training on virtues and on trusting your parents and on earning freedoms and all these different things. And if we invest the time to talk through those things and model that for them and explain it to them in non-conflict training and family times as we go about our normal course of life, sprinkling that into some life lessons as we are going, then it makes these conversations a little bit easier. Because if we don't do that, obviously then the kids are now at a crossroads with us because they want something and their moral warehouse hasn't been sort of fed and fully stocked, if you will, with these great moments and lessons of trusting the parents, developing the virtue, and then it becomes more of a conflict with them. So
share about your mom. Oh, this is an example for us of how we were training Michaela, our oldest at the time, to trust that mom and dad would make the best decisions about what she should eat. She had some allergies, some food insensitivities. So we were training very young, you know, mom and dad will help to choose what you eat. But grandma didn't understand that. So this is almost like one of the benefits of virtue training in your family. You're also virtue training and helping your extended family. But I want you to just share about that.
No, this was a good one because it was interesting, as Lisa said, we were trying to train a 0 to 5-year-old. I think Michaela was 2 or 3 at the time. And we're helping her to understand that we are making strategic food choices for her because they're going to be the best thing for her body. But she's too young to fully understand what that means. So obviously at this point, you are teaching them to trust mom and dad. But when mom and dad aren't around and you're with grandma, and grandma wants to spoil the kid, and grandma wants to expose the kid to everything New Orleans, right? And I think there may be like 2 good food items in New Orleans that are good for you and healthy. I don't know, maybe just 2. And so, so in that culture, there's just not a lot of good items. So she spends the day with grandma, and grandma takes her out, and she wants to have her first snow cone or something. It was a snow cone or a frozen cup.
Yes.
Snow cone, yeah. She wants to have her first snow cone, which is a big thing in New Orleans. And my mom is thinking, you guys are just strict parents. I know how to parent, and you guys are saying she can't have this. A little context I would add is my mom developed a curriculum called Parenting by Grace. And she taught it throughout Louisiana. So she just knew she was the authority on parenting, right? And in a lot of ways she was. But this is one where she just didn't anticipate what was going to happen. She takes Michaela out to have this snowball, and Michaela just breaks out her neck. She has an eczema reaction.
Swelling, everything.
Yeah, she started swelling and skin just broke out. And 2 things came out of that. My mom was so apologetic and just so humbled by the experience because she thought we were just being strict. She didn't really understand that there was a reason.
Moral reason why.
Yeah, deep reason. But what came out of that for Michaela was the natural consequences. So she saw illustrated at a very early age, 2 or 3, mom and dad really are trying to protect me because she was really uncomfortable and her skin, broke out and flared up. And that was something that taught her that, oh, when mom and dad say that they are protecting me, they really are.
So if
And
mom
so-
and dad say no, but grandma says yes, what happened was she paused. It was really beautiful to see that consequence taught her to pause and say, mom and dad are my parents that God has given me as an umbrella to
Mhm.
protect me. All of those things came together in those years of training. So we'll stop right there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
for those of you that have, and Bartlows, you can answer too, if you want, enough about this topic, but give us an example of when you send your kid to grandma's and unfortunately they don't have a bad reaction to something they shouldn't be doing, that maybe you set a boundary or the Centellans are smiling. I don't care. What do you notice about your kids and how do you get them back in the appropriate freedoms? Anybody want to share?
Yeah, so can I just
Did I explain that
I
one?
just want to restate that. So if your child goes to someone's house, usually grandma, grandpa, and gets spoiled or they get freedoms they don't have at home, for lack of better terms, and they don't suffer a consequence.
There you go. He says it so much better.
Then how did you guys address that when your child comes back home and maybe their behavior is a little out of that proverbial funnel? Like how did you guys address that?
Oh, there we are. Okay, hi. We'll go because this has been a lifelong struggle for us.
You don't have to say which grandparents.
More so mine. But there was always we just expected that there is going to be a period of just retraining and getting us back into a rhythm after spending an extended period of time with grandparents. So spending the night for a day or two is like, okay, so the next couple days are just have to redefine like, okay, so what does it look like here? And as they got older, we did have the same conversations like the Hurleys talked about, like mom and dad are here to protect you. God gave you to us to take care of you. And we'd have to go over some of the expectations. So I know one of the things that we had to talk about was like, you're not allowed to be on YouTube. you can't take a grandparent's phone and just watch whatever you want. So we got to the point where, our kids are comfortable saying, oh, we're not allowed to do that. And then they would just pick something else to do. But it takes a lot of intentional training, and sometimes it is mildly confusing to kind of try and navigate that, because we still want our kids to respect and love their grandparents, even when we're not necessarily on the same page.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
And just a couple more things. I think we would, if they stayed up late and there's no consequence while they're there, but when they get back home, they're cranky. We talk them through, well, how late did y'all stay up, and make sure they make that connection later. Cause it might not be an immediate, but there will be a consequence, and you're gonna be cranky, or you're gonna be really tired, or you're not ready for school because you weren't being diligent throughout the weekend. And then the other thing we taught them was, if we're with grandparents and we're also there, we are still the parents. We make the decisions. You need to run it by us. Now, if we're not there, you need to honor your grandparents and go to them and trust that they're going to look out for you. But it was very clear. We even had to clarify it with the grandparents of, hey, if we're here, they're coming to us. You may give them a candy, but they need to come back to us to ask, can we have that candy? So that, and it wasn't when they were really little. I mean, under 3, they couldn't handle that. But as they got older, past 3 or 4, that's when they started understanding the difference and what the proper protocols are. So
Awesome.
I don't know exactly what it was you said, but at one point I think Janelle went
No.
something to that effect.
No, but she
You had
was smiling.
you had full on affirmation going on there.
My kids were at their grandparents' house yesterday. So like during dinner, Everly goes, Mommy, I don't like being home because you don't let us watch TV all the time. But at Nana's house, we get to watch TV all the time. So I literally had to talk to her about why at home, Mommy and Daddy don't let her watch TV all the time. They get a short period, usually at like the same time of the day. And when they're at Nana's house, that's different.
Oh my God.
Literally at dinner.
I love it. You guys are awesome. Okay, so this next one's back to the Centellans. Why might it not be a good idea to allow your child to play with your cell phone?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Fun question. So, even when our kids were like super little, we were pretty strict on the electronic screen time thing. Just as my profession as a teacher, I see a lot of the negative effects. And if you research it at all the research kind of states that it's not great for our kids. And as an adult, I have very little self-control if I just let myself blatantly just sit there and stare and scroll on my phone. If I don't have the self-control to handle it, my children sure do not. So like when our kids were little bitty, all babies have the obsession with the remote. We did not let our child even touch the remote. We were like, nope, that's not for you. So I think kind of just setting that physical freedom with them at a very young age, because I think a lot of it goes back to freedoms. So I think the 2 questions we're answering is, why might it not be a good idea to allow your cell phone to be played with, and why should young children have a limited access to electronics? I'm just going to bundle those. And now I lost my train of thought. So going back to freedoms that we give our kids, I think a lot of times when they're little, they're very drawn into, the bright, shiny screen, and it gets them to sit down and be quiet. And it's kind of like this magical thing as a parent where you're like, oh, I have a moment to myself. And I think as a parent, it's really easy to kind of fall back on that, probably more than we should. But I think going back to those freedoms, you wouldn't allow your 7 or 8-year-old to have unfettered internet access. So you wouldn't allow your toddler to have abundance amounts of screen time because it's the same thing. You want to give them less freedoms when they're little and work your way out. So starting them off where they have the freedom to play on your phone while you're out, or have the freedom to watch a show whenever they want, you're going to find yourself having to reel that back in when they're older and they start asking you, well, why can't I have a cell phone? All my friends have a cell phone in kindergarten. Blows my mind. And you're just setting yourself up for having to backtrack when you could set yourself up for success much earlier. What we do now in our family is we do really limit the amount of time that our kids have access to electronics or screen time. I find that, you know, if it's been like a weird like vacation, like we've been watching the tablet in the car forever because that's the only thing to do. It really does have an effect on their mood and their disposition. Kind of that instant gratification of, I'm going to watch this show and I'm going to click this and I'm going to click that. Really puts them in a bad mood when you put an expectation on them again later. So I think it's really important to have really set limits for our kids. When they were really young, I mean, it was like you get 30 minutes a day. And now that we're a little bit older, we just kind of had to change how we do things because we were finding like, you know what, they don't really have the freedom to be on the screen during the week because they're not getting their responsibilities done. They're trying to rush through things and not be diligent in order to earn that screen time. So we actually just nixed Monday through Wednesday screen time at all. So then it's not even a question. They know, like, there's no screen time today. I'm not even gonna ask. Anything else?
Yeah, the other thing I'd just say is a lot of times when we're doing the screen time, you're missing really valuable training opportunities. So like if you're at a restaurant, it's a great opportunity to teach your kids how to sit and have a conversation and talk about things and relate to people and learn how to ask questions about someone else's life. You know, even in the car, I mean, if we're in the car for less than an hour, you're not going to get a tablet. It's truly reserved for vacations and longer trips, just because they need to learn the skill of just sitting there and not having something constantly in their face. And so you're just missing a lot of training opportunities when they are in front of those screens during those very important times of life. So
That was excellent.
That was awesome. Thank
great.
you, guys. That's
You
excellent.
Threw in good extras in there.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Okay, we're gonna jump to question 8 because I want to make sure.
No. I
Oh,
wanna
we're
do that
not.
one.
You want to do
Yes.
7 first?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I want to do that one next. I
Okay,
have
so
a reason.
Phil and Bree, how do you manage freedoms with multiple children?
And would you also answer, how did we word it? Also, why certain kids might have a freedom and another kid doesn't?
Yeah, yes. So I think it's really important that we don't compare our children just because they come from the same parents or in the same household. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to have the same freedoms at the same age. I could just think of trying to throw myself back in the 0 to 5, thinking about just potty training, for example. They all it was different. It wasn't the same for everyone. Some of them figured it out a lot quicker than the others, and we won't, embarrass our kids and tell you which ones, but that's just an example of how they are all different. And I think, really studying out the temperaments. I think at this age, when they're 0 to 5, they'll start coming out that you probably already figured this out, that if you have more than one child, that they're vastly different, but they're unique and special in their own way and created in God's image. And so I think what you'll find out with multiple children is that they will, mature at different times. And so I think it's important as the parent to pray for a lot of wisdom and to be on the same page if, with your spouse, and talk a lot about like what they're seeing at home, whoever's home more, or just what you're seeing, and having those conversations so that you can really, use resources like the freedom checklist and things like that to, really be intentional about, all right, our child, maybe, that he's not quite ready to have this freedom, and really having those conversations and reevaluating, praying, asking for wisdom, asking for advice, and then kind of repeating that pretty frequently. I know, just having those conversations are important so that y'all are on the same page.
Yeah.
What else was there? Yeah, I think that was the biggest part for my side.
Yeah, and I think I touched on this in the 6 to 12 class, but I think when you have multiple children, it's it would make your life easier if you oftentimes allow your younger children to have the same freedoms as your older children, even though that's not what's most beneficial for them. And so, because I think oftentimes like we deal with this exact scenario probably on a near daily basis, where we've got younger children, one child in particular who really sees what their older siblings are allowed to do, and they have not earned that freedom yet. And so I can feel tempted to want to allow them to have that same freedom, because I know that they are not going to be happy, when we go over why it is that they don't have that same freedom. And, so I think it's just making sure that you're just really doing what's best for your child. You know what I mean? I think it's just, again, easy to just by default kind of all roll them together and just allow them to all kind of do the same thing, versus, just making sure. And I think I think that way, siblings won't grow resentful either. I think they're quick to be like, well, I don't feel like they because I'm trying not to use names. So, so like we have one child who, if I allow her to do what her older siblings are doing, then if she has not earned that freedom, she is then not going to be a joy if she's doing that with her older siblings. They will then feel resentful because they feel like, I don't feel like this sibling has earned this freedom, and we have, and then it kind of undermines all the training that you've done and really explaining to them about earned freedom. And then they don't feel like it's really an earned freedom. Like, well, I guess that if all of us are allowed to do this, you know what I mean? Versus it feeling like it's a privilege because they earned it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think what else. I'll stop there.
Awesome, guys. Thank you
That's
very
good.
much. That was excellent.
Can I ask, can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, it took me a second to figure out where you were.
On that topic, Phil and Bree, do you have any of your children that are younger that are earning freedoms before your older ones, and how does that work? Because ours are we've only got two, so one of them's a little
You know which
delayed,
ones we're talking about, it's fine.
One of the younger ones.
One of them, the only one. No, surprisingly, well, can you think of an example? So, can you think of an example though where that's been the case? Because
I think I have, with no, our oldest and our second is, I feel like I feel like he's learned and grasped some things that our older one hasn't. And I think we have given him a little bit more freedom in terms of
at a younger age.
at a younger age.
So then
yes.
she will bring that up. Sorry, we're
Yes.
trying not to use names. So she will say, well, I didn't have that freedom at that age,
Mhm.
And so then we have to kind of go back to okay, but what defines earning a freedom? What virtues do you need to exhibit in
Mhm.
order for that to be the case? And then I think too, just speaking a lot of life into the situation, we talked a lot about this in the previous classes. I think that child can then just be kind of hard on herself and, but and this is where, the temperaments comes into play, that all of us have our strengths and weaknesses, all have things that we're really working on and growing in, really speaking a lot of words of life. We want to help you grow in this area. So I would say, and I don't know, I mean, time will tell. I think I could see that kind of playing out in some of our children as they grow older. But I think that's a good example of where they'll be quick to bring up well, I wasn't that age when I earned that freedom. You know what I mean? So there's been a little bit of that, I would say.
I was just going to add too, I think this is why it's so important to study out temperaments, even though under the age of 5, there's a good chance you won't have an accurate view of what's really their temperament. It's good to start talking about it young, about how we're just all different and how we all have strengths and we all have associated weaknesses, and that we're all there. Regardless of what those are, we're still of value.
Yes.
And it's really important because as your kids age, especially ours are all 2 years apart, they, you know, whether it's an earned freedom, it could be just a privilege. For example, 2 of our daughters played soccer, and our younger one, you know, was called up to be seen by the U.S. Scouts, and it crushed our middle daughter because well, now you know who I'm talking about. Sorry. But she wouldn't care if I shared now. But it was really hard on her because they both played the same sport, and one ended up having a more natural gift, and my middle one worked really hard. And but that's life. Life's not fair. And so I know that's an example of just you know, the youngest was more privileged with talent in that area. But we had highlighted so many other virtues in our other daughter that helped with, you know, identifying that. And so that's why, you know, kids are just going to be different, you know. And then our middle one is absolutely the one who we've decided will take care of us as we age, because she will remember to give us our medication. She's very responsible. No, it is a joke in our house that our oldest and our youngest,
we would die by accident.
Yeah. But our middle one, she will take care of us. So it's a joke, but obviously.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, the reason that it may seem like a less important video, but the reason we included the importance of words in that group of 6 is because it is so important to be speaking life into your kids. And one of the things we need to teach is what it really means to rejoice in someone else's success and grieve in someone else's loss, right? And what a beautiful environment to teach that than in your own family. That's fantastic, you know, that this child has really grown in this specific area and earned this particular freedom, you know, maybe 6 months earlier than you had earned it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're proud of her. We're happy for her. And look at your strengths, you know, just speaking life into these kids so they see themselves the way God sees them.
I think, Erin, I would love for you to speak to this. Why don't you share your story, why I asked you to be on the call? And then I know you could speak to this because of your older son versus your younger one.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin, and I'm here as a special needs parent. My kids now are turning 21 and 19 this summer, so far past the 0 to 5 age, but it all starts way back then. And I'm like bursting with so much to say because everything said is so applicable. It just looks a little bit differently. One, I want to start with the scripture in Genesis 1:26. It says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over," and it goes on to, you know, living life and doing things. But I bring that scripture up just to say that even our children with any kind of diagnosis, and from what we consider simple, you know, dyslexia or ADHD or social anxiety to autism to Down syndrome to physical disabilities, it's all God made them in his own image. And so there's parts of God that are just like that. And that just gives me great security and hope, knowing that. So my oldest son has autism and ADHD, although he is not hyper. It's just the labeling these days. But did you want me to speak specifically to the differentiating? Yeah. So there was a lot that my younger son was able to do before my older son. And that was just based on, you know, he might have been 5 compared to 3 years old, but mentally and ability wise, he might have only, for quite a long time, I kind of had twins at their age capabilities and mental capabilities. You know, the challenging part, I think, at this young age is that if you have a child with any kind of diagnosis, you might just be going, I don't know. That looks different. My 8-month-old baby could sit and play on a mat for hours. Now I have a very small house. It was only 600 square feet, but I could clean the entire house and he would not move. And my friends' kids that were the exact same age were all over the place crawling and things. So there was stirring in my heart of like, what's going on here? So you might be at that phase of like, this is new. You might be at a phase where a teacher or a friend or a family member has come to you and they're like, have you ever considered XYZ? Have you ever noticed this about your kid? Maybe there's something to look into here. You might be at the phase of testing, getting the diagnosis. And so there's a lot of learning at this phase, this young age phase. And so it's really important to know that all of this biblical parenting is 1,000% appropriate and accurate to raising that child. Just like everyone else that's here, it's just going to look a little bit different. Michael Hurley said family time and getting ahead, huge benefit. Like you need to front load that child with expectations, what's to come, you know, how we do things, getting ahead of what it's going to look like as they go along their day. Stephen said limiting options, blue cup, red cup. Nope, you just get this cup today. Or as they, you know, obviously you're dressing them until a certain age, but once they start to want to dress, I would limit my child's choices. It's shorts and it's a green pair of shorts or a blue pair of shorts. It's a red pair of shorts and a brown or a shirt, you know, things like that. But guess what? I also did that with my typical child.
Yeah.
We just kind of, so you see, there's not a difference in that. It was just a matter of like, mom's going to make those choices or as they earned that choice to choose, you know, it was only between two things. So keeping it limited. Kelly said scheduling activities at the same day, the same time, the same amount of time. Huge opportunity parenting young special needs kids is that it's a routine and it's scheduled and they thrive on that. They thrive on boundaries. They thrive on knowing their freedoms and their consequences and receiving them. It might look harder or feel harder. Their tantrums might be bigger and last longer. And that's a part of their symptoms that they have is that they're overstimulated or don't know how to control their emotions and what's inside. It doesn't mean that it, you know, is a bad choice. It can just be easier for us though to be like, oh, they have a disability or a diagnosis, or we don't know yet. Or so it's very crucial, I think, at this point in life to not make excuses for our kids. I'm trying to think of something. Oh, my son likes to pace. Still, he's 20, going on 21, and we had a conversation 2 nights ago and he paced the entire hour. But that's how he listens. So it's learning things like, okay, I can't have him sit down to listen to this. He might have to walk. Well, I started pacing with him. That's how we do it, you know, instead of just the box looks different is what I'm trying to say. It might not be look in my eyes. It might be look at my chin. Also, as far as the multiple kids thing, to address that component, a lot of it is bringing along those kids because everybody needs to know in the family how we function as a family. This child with special needs or anything different is not separate from the rest of us. Yep. This is our family makeup. This is how we exist. And this is how we care for each other. So Like my younger son might be able to, if they were like having the same issue, let's say, he might be able to respond quickly, and we could easily be like, okay, let's move on. And sometimes there's like, you get to now go forward and do this because there's that earned freedom because you understand it better. And I need to take time to explain it to my non-typical child at a lengthier process or pace, and break things down. So the other thing I want to say too is, well, I have 1,000 things to say, but breaking down the expectations of what you get from that child is really important, especially at a young age. Like, you might expect this much from your, say, typical child. Let's bring it down. I'm going to expect this much in this scenario with these circumstances for that same situation. So it's really learning how to, you got to learn their symptoms. I would also encourage you, if your child is, you might be working with teachers, therapists, they're going to give you a lot of practicals of how to speak to them. There's physical touch, there's taking them out of the situation. I mean, the list goes on, but you have a team and build your team of people that are going to help you learn how to manage the symptoms part of their disability, their diagnosis. So, and then applying the biblical aspect within those parameters is important. I'll give you one funny quick example. When I was potty training my son, and I can share this because he publicly shares this, so but I would say he got a portion of the potty training pretty easily. You know, the second half was a little harder, and I would say, listen to your body. And he finally said, Mommy, my body doesn't say anything. But I could have said that to another child that would just infer like, oh, like, you know, they get it. But he was literally waiting for like words to come out of his body. And he goes, I don't hear anything. I'm like,
Other things.
you're right. I mean, you're right. You know, so I had to change my language to help teach him and get him over that hump. And that became the case his whole life. Even driving, I had to use different terms teaching him to drive than I did with my younger son, who got to drive before my older son. So did I hit everything I should hit? Or
We're gonna have Erin, she doesn't even know the long list of things I want her to do. No, but I mean, yeah, I think, you know, special needs, or even you called it a typical child. I hadn't heard that term, so it was good for me to hear.
Yeah.
You know, again, they're all different, and I think yeah, it'll be good to have you speaking more to this specifically with unique needs. I do want everybody to know, if you don't know, Axel is a Christian.
yes,
He became a disciple what age?
15.
Yeah.
So it's been 5 years now, over 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, he has virtue, and
Yes.
and I love in the last class she talked about first time obedience for him, or that was the last class, right? You talked about how he didn't have to make eye contact because he had autism, but he just had to look somewhere in this area. And
Yes.
so again, what I love about Erin and Marty is that they didn't let their son become a victim of his situation, but instead they empowered him with what his natural gifts are and strengthened them. So anyway, thank you, Erin. That was very, very helpful.
On that note, Tammy, I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to say this. Because at this young age, you might be coming across a potential diagnosis or labeling, and that can feel very scary, very judged. There's a lot of feelings that go with special needs families, that shame, grief, guilt, and it's a roller coaster. So if you want to talk about that, it's a whole nother subject. But so it can be easy to be like, I don't want a diagnosis, I don't want a labeling, but it definitely has empowered our family and my child to understand who they are and how God made them, that they're made wrong, that they have different gifts and different challenges, and they just need to learn how to navigate it. So my preference, I should say, is get that diagnosis and get all the resources that come with it. Like, get the help, get the structure, get the obviously you make your own choices, but I'm just saying, there can be so much good by knowing the definition of a diagnosis.
Excellent.
So awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. What questions do you want to hit?
I don't, oh, well, we just have that one, I think. I think that, so number 8, I do want to say the essence of that question is,
Well, they don't know what it is.
I
so-
know, but I was thinking more for the Salyers. So will you read the question and then I'm going to paraphrase
Yeah,
it.
my child has ADHD.
No. Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
said number 8.
I'm sorry.
You want number 9? Okay,
Sorry.
all right. That one's too small. Sorry.
That's why I have
Um,
my glasses on too.
My child has been working on not letting their emotions get out of control while playing video games. But is that what you want to address as
It
video
could
games?
just be doing any activity.
Yeah, not letting his emotions get out of control when engaged in an activity. He calms himself down on his own for the most part, but there are times when I have to go into the room and help him out. Then he does calm down. Should there still be a consequence? It's not like he's losing control every time he plays, so I'm not sure how to address it because he's getting a lot better at it.
Okay, so here's a child who, has been trained in an area. He falls in it occasionally, but he is overall characterized. I mean, he's improving, and he just falls occasionally. So, should there be a consequence? Salyers, do you want to answer that?
All right. I would say in this situation, and just I think that what the kids need, especially at this age, or I mean any age, is that they need people there to monitor and help. And so I think like say if it's for this age playing a game in the backyard, or it could be anything, I guess, like you said, it could be anything. I think it's good to have our eyes on those things as parents, and looking for opportunities to help them out and train and teach in that moment. So if something comes up, that you can be there. I think, sending a 5-year-old out to the backyard to play with the 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds without any supervision might not go well. And maybe, especially if you know that your child gets upset, while playing with him because they just can't keep up, or they just don't have the same freedoms as the older kids. So I think that would be my first advice, is just making sure that you're kind of, as the parent, you're in there being that, those eyes to help bring those things to take note of them and be able to work with them. And it get the conflict, actually gives you an opportunity to teach. So, I think if they're not characterized by it, maybe you don't give a consequence. But if it's something that's happened 3 or 4 times that day, then maybe, obviously, taking away some of those freedoms would be appropriate. But if it's, if they, I think it just depends on the situation, whether you give a consequence or not. I think the decision tree, taking all context and consideration, maybe talking with your spouse or someone else, helping them out with that. But I think the biggest thing is that when these things come up, it's not inconvenience, it's a good thing. That's the biggest thing I would take away from some of these classes, is conflict actually helps bring to surface things that are in our child's character that we can work on with them. So yeah, I think, did I miss anything on that?
No, I mean, I think just at this age, I think it, kind of to Aaron's point, I think regardless of whether you have a special needs child or not, it's just, like, constantly like relaying what the expectation is, like each morning, reminding them of what your expectations are. And then, and even just having them like relay that back to you, in their own words, so that that they've heard what you're saying, that they understand. And yeah, I think just, knowing it's going to take time, especially at this age, it's just, it's just lots of repetition, I would say. And just on a side note in regards to just freedoms in general, I know we keep using that word. And I think for me, I think what was most helpful at this age, because, when we first started out with biblical parenting, our oldest were 4 and 2 at the time, and I just had no idea, like, just how much freedom they actually had. And so, Tammy, on the website, is there a link to like where it breaks down different freedoms by different ages and examples of what those individual freedoms are? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have this document that I made that's similar.
Okay, yeah, and that's maybe the one I'm thinking of, but
Yeah, I think it's this one.
yeah, there was one that was more of like a bullet point, but yeah, that was just so incredibly helpful because I think we just oftentimes give our children freedoms without even realizing it, you know. And so I think it's just, and then I think too that they're growing so rapidly at this age that I think it's really important to constantly revisit that. You know, it's easy to just let months or even a year go by, and before you know it, you just have given them far more freedoms than they, you know, really should have at this age or that they've earned, or vice versa. You know, you are keeping too tight of a funnel and they need to have more freedoms because that'll then expose more things in their character, you know, for you to work on and grow in. So I would just encourage it for this particular age to constantly be revisiting what freedoms they even should and shouldn't have at, you know, various ages and stages.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, guys, gosh, I just, you know, Tammy and I, when a number of the people on the panel have sat through 3 of these classes, and I am always overwhelmed by just the God's grace poured out on us by the wisdom that you guys are sharing. So we're so grateful
Mhm.
for everybody that's participating on the panels, and I just feel so joyful for our local congregation, right? That we have this kind of community and this kind of help. And I just want to reiterate what Mike and Lisa said when they first started sharing that, man, what a blessing that you guys are able to start off your children at these ages with an appropriate level of freedoms and learning to and earning the freedoms that they have. It will completely change the trajectory of a traditional child's upbringing. So I'm so grateful for everybody that's volunteering, you know, their time to be on this phone call and participate with us. We really
Yeah.
do respect and love
doing
each one of you guys. You had something, Tim?
Yeah, he just made me think of something too. I mean, as adults, I didn't say in this class, I don't think, but as adults, we all have different freedoms. You know, some of us have the freedom to be on our phones longer than others because of self-control levels. Some of us, you know, can watch certain TV shows and others don't.
Mhm.
Some can drink alcohol, some don't. So this whole concept, guys, is teaching your child that even as adults, as Christians, we have different, I should say, freedoms. And Dave and I always shared that with our girls, and all 3 of our girls are different. And they talk about this with no shame. You know, one daughter, social media makes her feel more insecure, so she tends to limit it. You know, another daughter, social media or just being on her phone, she just really struggles with stewardship issues. She's self-aware. Right. So the goal is our kids are becoming self-aware and then they can govern themselves when they're adults. But we don't want them, you know, being clueless to this because they just had unlimited freedoms. Right. So anyway, the concept applies to us. So
Yeah.
what you're doing today will influence them as adults.
Yeah.
So.
Well, guys,